I pulled into the driveway in Briar Glen, rehearsing the smile I kept ready for my mother, mostly for the sake of my 8-year-old daughter. Lila. She had been buzzing about Grandma's big surprise all week. I had no idea that within the hour, I would watch every single one of my nieces and nephews unwrap a brand new iPhone 17 Pro Max while Lila was handed a spiral notebook. It was not an oversight. It was a very precise, very public lesson. The drive to Briar Glen always felt like traveling backward in time. Not just geographically, but emotionally. As my sedan hummed along the freshly paved asphalt of the interstate, moving further away from the city and closer to the manicured, emerald green lawns of my childhood, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. It was a physical sensation, a phantom corset lacing tighter with every mile marker I passed. My daughter, Lila, sat in the booster seat behind me, kicking her legs in a rhythm that matched the pop song playing softly on the radio. She was 8 years old, made of sunshine and unfiltered hope, and she had spent the entire week vibrating with excitement about Grandma's surprise. "Do you think it is a puppy?" Lila asked for the third time since we merged onto the highway. Her voice was high and breathy, filled with the kind of anticipation that makes adults nervous because we know how often the world fails to deliver. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her dark curls were pulled back in a headband she had chosen specifically for dinner because she knew her grandmother liked her hair out of her face. That small detail, that tiny concession to Marjorie Whittaker's preferences, made my stomach turn. Lila was already learning the dance. "I doubt it is a puppy, sweetie," I said, keeping my tone light, carefully scrubbing the anxiety from the edges of my words. "Grandma is not really a dog person. Remember when Aunt Tessa brought that golden retriever over?" Lila giggled. Grandma stood on the couch. "Exactly. So let us manage our expectations. It is probably something for school, or maybe a trip. Whatever it is huge," Lila insisted. She told me on FaceTime that it was a game changer. That was the word she used. Game changer. I gripped the steering wheel harder. Marjorie used corporate buzzwords when she was planning something strategic. My mother did not give gifts. She made investments. She curated moments. And if she had told an 8-year-old that a present was a game changer, she had already set the stage for a performance I was not sure I wanted to be a part of. But I was the daughter who tried to keep the peace, the one who had spent 32 years trying to prove I could be reasonable without being compliant. So I kept driving, rehearsing my smile, checking my lipstick in the visor mirror, and praying that for once, a family dinner would just be a dinner. When we pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly as it always did. It was a sprawling colonial with white shutters and brickwork that looked like it had been scrubbed with a toothbrush. My sister Tessa's SUV was already there, parked slightly crooked, and my brother Graham's older sedan was tucked near the garage. We were the last to arrive. As we walked up the path, the front door swung open before I could even ring the bell. Marjorie stood there, framed by the warm, golden light of the foyer. She looked impeccable, as she always did, wearing a cashmere cardigan in a soft oatmeal color that probably cost more than my first car. Her silver hair was an architectural marvel of volume and spray. "There are my girls," she cooed, bypassing me entirely to crouch down and hug Lila. "Hi, Grandma," Lila squealed, hugging her back with genuine affection. I watched them, feeling that mixture of gratitude and wariness that defines modern motherhood. I wanted Lila to be loved. I just did not want her to be consumed. "Hello." "Mom," I said, stepping inside and closing the door against the chill of the Ohio evening. Marjorie stood up, smoothing her slacks. "Eleanor, you look tired. Are you taking your iron?" "I am fine." "Mom, just a long week at work." "Work," she sighed. As if my career as a paralegal was a tragic hobby I refused to give up. "Well, come in. Everyone is in the dining room. We are starting immediately. I do not want the pot roast to dry out." The dining room was set like a photo shoot for a lifestyle magazine. Heavy linen napkins, crystal water goblets, and a centerpiece of white hydrangeas that were so fresh they looked fake. Tessa offered me a sympathetic wave from across the table. She looked exhausted, wrestling her two sons, Leo and Sam, into their chairs. Graham was already pouring himself a glass of wine, his posture slumped, the universal sign of a man who owed money or was about to ask for it. We took our seats. Lila sat next to Leo, vibrating with energy. The air in the room felt thick, charged with a specific frequency that only Marjorie could generate. It was the frequency of impending benevolence. She was about to bestow something upon us, which meant we were all expected to perform gratitude. "Before we eat," Marjorie said, tapping a silver spoon against her glass. The sound was sharp and commanded instant silence. Marjorie remained standing at the head of the table. She looked at her grandchildren, Leo, Sam, Graham's daughter Bella, and Lila, with a benevolent, slightly watery smile. "I have been thinking a lot lately about family," Marjorie began. Her voice was practiced, melodic. "I have been thinking about how dangerous the world is becoming. How hard it is to stay close when everyone is so busy, running in a million directions." I took a sip of water, watching her over the rim of the glass. "Here it comes," I thought. "I want my grandchildren to be safe," she continued. "I want to know where they are. I want them to be able to reach me. And I want to be able to reach them. But more than that, I want us to be connected. A family is a network. If one part of the network goes dark, we all worry." She gestured to the sideboard behind her. There were 5 gift bags lined up. They were silver, metallic, and expensive-looking. Graham sat up straighter. Tessa looked nervous. "So," Marjorie said, clasping her hands, "I decided it was time to upgrade everyone. For safety. For connection." She began to hand out the bags. She gave one to Leo, one to Sam, one to Bella. The kids tore into the tissue paper with feral intensity. "Oh my God!" Bella screamed. "No way." I watched as Graham's daughter pulled out a sleek white box. Even from my seat, I recognized the packaging immediately. It was an iPhone 17 Pro Max, the top of the line, the kind of phone that cost $1,200 before you even added a case. Leo and Sam pulled out identical boxes. The room erupted in chaotic joy. The kids were screaming, holding the boxes up like trophies. Graham was laughing, looking genuinely relieved, probably calculating how much money this saved him on birthday presents. Tessa looked stunned but pleased. "Mom, this is insane," Tessa said. This is too much. Nothing is too much for safety," Marjorie said, beaming. Then she picked up the last bag. She walked over to Lila. Lila's eyes were wide, reflecting the glossy white boxes her cousins were clutching. She reached out her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. "And for my sweet Lila," Marjorie said, her voice dropping an octave. Lila took the bag. She reached in. She pulled out the tissue paper. I watched her face. I saw the confusion ripple across her features before she could hide it. She pulled out a notebook. It was a nice notebook. It had a floral cover and a pink ribbon bookmark. But it was a notebook. Lila stared at it. She looked into the bag again, thinking perhaps the phone was underneath. It was empty. She looked up at Marjorie, her expression crumbling into a heartbreaking mix of bewilderment and shame. Marjorie smiled down at her, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You and I are going to use that to write letters to each other, Lila. And inside, there is a special promise for later, when you are ready." The silence that followed was instantaneous and violent. The joy in the room evaporated. Bella stopped screaming. Leo looked at his phone, then at Lila, then down at his lap. Graham cleared his throat loudly and took a massive gulp of wine. Lila held the notebook against her chest. She did not cry. She was too shocked to cry. She just sat there, small and singular, while her cousins held the future in their hands and she held paper. "Mom," I said. My voice sounded very loud in the quiet room. Marjorie turned to me, her eyebrows raised in polite inquiry. "Yes. Eleanor? Can I speak to you in the kitchen?" Now. It was not a request. I stood up, my legs feeling shaky. Marjorie sighed. a long, suffering exhalation that suggested I was ruining a perfect moment, and followed me through the swinging door. As soon as the door swung shut, sealing us off from the dining room, I turned on her. "What was that?" I hissed, keeping my voice low so Lila would not hear. "You bought every other grandchild a phone, and you gave my daughter a notebook? In front of everyone?" Marjorie walked over to the oven and opened it to check the roast. A blast of heat and savory meat smell hit me, making me feel nauseous. "I gave her a gift appropriate for her situation," Marjorie said calmly. She closed the oven door. "Appropriate?" I repeated. "She is 8. Leo is 9. You gave Leo a phone. Leo's parents are on board with the program," Marjorie said. She turned to face me, wiping her hands on a tea towel. "The program?" I stared at her. "What program?" "The family plan. Eleanor." She said it as if it were a government initiative. "I bought the phones," Marjorie explained, her tone maddeningly reasonable, "but they are all activated on a single family account. My account. It includes the safety bundle, location sharing, content monitoring, use limits. It ensures that I know where the children are and what they are exposed to. It is about protecting the family." I felt a cold prickle run down my spine. "You want to track them. I want to care for them," she corrected. Tessa and Graham agreed immediately. They understand that it takes a village. But you... She looked at me with a disappointment so deep it felt like a physical blow. "You are so secretive. Eleanor, you have always been. You have all these rules. No screens at dinner. No social media until high school. You hoard Lila like she is a state secret. I knew if I gave her a phone, you would just lock it in a drawer or disable the tracking. So you humiliated her?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You decided to punish an 8-year-old because you do not like my parenting boundaries?" "It is not punishment," Marjorie said. She reached out and brushed a piece of lint off my blazer. "It is a consequence. If you cannot participate in the family safety standards, you do not get the family benefits. It is that simple. I am not rewarding your obstinance. This isn't about safety, Mom. It is about control. You want to see where we are on a map. You want to read their texts. I want to be a grandmother," she snapped, her veneer cracking for a fraction of a second. "I want to be involved, and since you refuse to let me in the front door, I have to find other ways to ensure that child is safe." She took a breath and smoothed her cardigan. The mask slid back into place. "Lila can have a phone the minute you agree to the terms. It is sitting in my office. All you have to do is say yes. Yes to the plan. Yes to the sharing settings. Yes to being part of this family properly." I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the steel behind the soft cashmere. She truly believed she was the hero of this story. She believed that surveillance was love and that autonomy was betrayal. "I am not signing up for your tracking device, Mom." "Then Lila keeps the notebook," Marjorie said simply. She picked up a platter of roasted potatoes. "Now, are we going to eat, or are you going to make a scene and ruin your brother's night? You know he needs this." She pushed past me and went back into the dining room. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, gripping the edge of the granite counter until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to grab Lila and leave. I wanted to flip the table. But I knew exactly what that would look like. It would look like Eleanor being dramatic, Eleanor being unstable, Eleanor ruining the generosity of St. Marjorie. I forced myself to breathe. In for 4, out for 4. I had to go back out there. I had to protect Lila from the fallout. When I walked back into the dining room, the atmosphere was excruciating. The kids had put the boxes away, but the energy was still unbalanced. Tessa was cutting Leo's meat with aggressive focus. Graham was drinking his wine faster. Lila was staring at her notebook. She had opened it and was tracing the lines on the first page with her finger. I sat down next to her and put my hand on her back. She leaned into me, a small, warm weight. Marjorie began serving the roast as if nothing had happened. "So, Graham," she said brightly, "tell me about the new job prospects." As she ladled gravy onto plates, her eyes flickered over to Lila. "You know, Lila," Marjorie said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, Your cousin Bella is going to be able to play some very fun games on her new phone, maybe, if you are cooperative, and if your mommy decides to be a little more open-minded, you can earn one too. Lila looked up, hope warring with confusion in her eyes. Earn it? Yes, Marjorie said. By showing us that you can follow the family rules. I felt the blood roar in my ears. This was not just about me anymore. She was bypassing me to negotiate directly with my daughter. She was telling Lila that the reason she was left out was because her mother was failing her. Mom, I said, my voice sharp. Drop it. Marjorie smiled and took a bite of potato. I am just explaining the incentives. Eleanor. The rest of the dinner was a blur of chewing and silence. I barely tasted the food. I spent the entire time creating a force field around Lila, answering questions for her, deflecting Marjorie's passive-aggressive comments, and checking the time on my watch every 3 minutes. When we finally stood up to leave, the relief was dizzying. Thank you for dinner. Mom, I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Marjorie kissed the air next to my cheek. Think about the offer. Eleanor, the phone is already paid for. It is just waiting for you to stop being stubborn. I walked Lila to the car. Holding her hand so tightly, I had to remind myself to loosen my grip. As soon as I buckled her in and shut the door, the silence of the vehicle wrapped around us. I drove away from the house without looking back. We were silent for the first 10 minutes. I turned the radio down. Then, a small voice from the back seat broke the quiet. Mommy? Yes. Baby? Did I do something wrong? The question hit me harder than the lack of a gift. It was the question every child of a narcissist eventually learns to ask. It was the seed of the doubt that Marjorie had planted in me 30 years ago. And now she was planting it in my daughter. I pulled the car over. I did not care that we were on the shoulder of a dark suburban road. I put the car in park and turned around to face her. The streetlights cast long, orange shadows across her face. Lila, look at me. She looked up, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Do you hear me? Nothing. You were perfect. You are perfect. Then why did everyone else get a phone? She asked, her voice trembling. Grandma said it was because of rules. Grandma and I have different ideas about how grown-ups should share things. I said, struggling to find language that was honest but age-appropriate. Grandma bought those phones so she could see where everyone is all the time, like a tracker. And I told her that I am the one who keeps you safe, not a phone. Because she didn't like my answer. She didn't give you the gift. That was not about you. That was about Grandma being mad at me. Lila sniffled. So I am not bad? You are the best thing in the world, I said fiercely. And you know what? Those phones are going to be annoying. Bella is going to have to answer texts when she is trying to play. We are free, and we are going to have a mom and me weekend, I added, improvising wildly. Just us. We will go to the science center. We will get the biggest ice cream they sell. No screens. Just fun. Really? Lila asked, a small smile touching her lips. Really. I promise. She nodded, seeming satisfied, but I could see the shadow behind her eyes. The seed was there. Marjorie had ensured that Lila felt the cold draft of exclusion. We drove the rest of the way home in a lighter mood, singing along to the radio, but my mind was racing. I was angry. Yes, but I was also uneasy. Marjorie's behavior was cruel, but it was usually subtler than this. A public shunning was an escalation, and the way she had talked about the family plan, the intensity of it, bothered me. Marjorie was controlling, but she was also cheap. Buying 5 iPhone 17 Pro Max units was an expenditure of at least $6,000 or $7,000, plus the monthly fees. That was a massive financial layout just to track her grandkids. When we got home, I went through the routine: pajamas, teeth brushing, a story. I lay with Lila until her breathing evened out, stroking her hair, trying to transfer my strength into her through my fingertips. When I finally walked out of her room, it was 10:30 at night. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My phone was sitting on the counter. The screen pulsed with a notification. I picked it up. It was a group text. Whitaker family iPhone plan. I stared at the name of the group. Tessa, Graham, and Marjorie were in it. And me. Marjorie had added me. I opened the thread. Marjorie. I am so glad we could get everyone set up today. Here is the link to the final paperwork. I need everyone to e-sign tonight so the data rollover happens by morning. Love you all. Below the message was a hyperlink to a document signing platform. Tessa. On it. Thanks again, Mom. The boys are over the moon. Graham. Signing now. You're the best. Marge. I felt a surge of irritation. I wasn't part of this. Why was she including me? Was this another jab? A way to show me what I was missing? My thumb hovered over the link. I shouldn't open it. I should leave the group chat. I should delete the thread. But curiosity, and a nagging sense of alarm, made me tap it. The browser opened. It was a contract for a multi-line business account with a major carrier. I scrolled down, squinting at the fine print on the small screen. Account holder, Marjorie Whittaker. Service address, 442 Elm Street, Briar Glen, Ohio. Authorized users, 1. Tessa Vance. 2. Graham Whittaker, 3. Eleanor Butler. I froze. My name. She had listed me as an authorized user. I scrolled further. Responsible parties for liability and overages. 1. Marjorie Whittaker. 2. Eleanor Butler. My breath caught in my throat. Responsible party, that wasn't just access. That was financial liability. That meant if the bill wasn't paid, they could come after me. If the equipment was damaged, it was on my credit. How could she do this? You can't just add someone to a contract without their consent. I tapped the button that said, View Full Agreement. A pop-up window appeared. For security, a verification code has been sent to the primary mobile number on file ending in -8821. I stared at the screen. My phone number ended in 6540. Marjorie's ended in 9900. I didn't know anyone with a number ending in 8821. I tried to back out, but the page refreshed. Please enter the 6-digit code to proceed. I stood in my dark kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. The realization washed over me cold and slow. Marjorie hadn't just put my name on a list to be nice. She hadn't just hoped I would join. She had set up an account, used my name, used my legal identity to list me as a liable party, and linked the verification to a phone number I didn't control. This wasn't a gift. It wasn't even a trap. It was fraud. I looked down at the group chat. Tessa and Graham were sending heart emojis. They were signing. They were locking themselves in. And somewhere, on a device I didn't own, a verification code was pinging, confirming that Eleanor Butler was on board, that Eleanor Butler was compliant, that Eleanor Butler belonged to Marjorie Whittaker, whether she liked it or not. I set my glass down on the counter. My hand was shaking. I wasn't just the daughter who got left out anymore. I was the daughter who was being framed. I looked at the unread message from my mother at the bottom of the screen. Marjorie. Eleanor. Don't be difficult. Just sign. It is already done. I turned off my screen. The room went black. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that the war had just begun. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a headache that throbbed behind my eyes like a second. Angry pulse. I sat at my kitchen table, a mug of coffee cooling untouched in front of me, staring at the phone I had placed face down on the placemat. The group text from the night before, the one titled with a party popper emoji that felt like a mockery, was still sitting there. A digital landmine I was afraid to detonate. Lila was at school. Caleb was at work. The house was quiet, but it was the heavy, expectant silence of a room where a weapon has been drawn but not yet fired. I picked up my phone and dialed the customer service number for the carrier listed in the link Marjorie had sent. I did not click the link again. I did not want to trigger whatever tripwire lay embedded in that digital contract. Instead, I navigated the automated labyrinth of the main customer support line. Press 1 for English. Press 3 for billing. Press 0 for a human being who might be able to explain why my mother was trying to mortgage my privacy. After 20 minutes of hold music, a looping, distorted jazz track that sounded like it was being played underwater, a voice clicked on the line. "Thank you for calling. My name is Brenda. May I have your name and account number? My name is Eleanor Butler." I said, keeping my voice steady, "I do not have an account number, or at least, I do not believe I should. I received a notification last night implying that I was being added to a plan, and I want to check if my information has been used to open anything in my name." "One moment. Eleanor, let me look you up. Do you have the social security number associated with the request?" I gave her my social. I hated doing it. Every time I spoke the numbers aloud, I felt a little more exposed, a little more vulnerable. There was a long pause. I could hear the click-clack of a keyboard on Brenda's end. The silence stretched out, tightening the knot in my stomach. "Okay, Mrs. Butler," Brenda said, her tone shifting from rote professional to slightly cautious. "I do see a pending request here. It looks like an authorized user application attached to a multi-line business account. The primary holder is listed as Marjorie Whitaker." The air left my lungs. Hearing it confirmed was different than suspecting it. Suspecting it was paranoia. Confirming it was a violation. I did not authorize that. I said, "I did not sign anything. I did not give permission for my social security number to be used." "I understand," Brenda said, though she sounded like she did not understand at all. "The account is currently in a draft status. It looks like it is waiting for final e-signatures to be fully activated, but the credit check and the user profiles have been set up." "The credit check?" I asked, my voice rising. "You ran a credit check?" "The system performs a soft inquiry for authorized users who are listed as responsible parties," Brenda explained. "It says here you are listed as a secondary liable party. That means if the primary holder defaults, the secondary party assumes financial responsibility for the equipment and the service contract." I closed my eyes. Marjorie hadn't just added me to a plan so we could chat more easily. She had made me a co-signer on a debt. 5 iPhone 17 Pro Max units, accessories, high-tier data plans. We were talking about thousands of dollars of liability. "Brenda," I said, gripping the phone, "I need you to cancel that request immediately. I am telling you, this is fraudulent. I did not agree to this. I can note the account. Mrs. Butler," Brenda said, her voice retreating into bureaucratic safety. "But because the application was initiated by the primary holder with verified information, I cannot delete the entire file without an investigation. I can flag your profile as disputed. However, if the primary holder produces a signed agreement, she won't produce a signed agreement because I am not signing it." I cut in. "Well, then the application will eventually time out," Brenda said, "but right now, it is in the system." I hung up feeling colder than I had before the call. It was real. My name was already in the machine. Marjorie had walked into a store, handed over my social security number, which she must have had written down in her files from when I was in college, and set this up. I needed to talk to someone who knew what was happening. I pulled up my contacts and called my sister. "Tessa." Tessa answered on the second ring. I could hear the background noise of her life, the hum of the television, the clatter of dishes. "Hey, Elle," Tessa said. Her voice was breezy, too casual. She knew. "Tessa," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Did you know Mom put me down as a responsible party on this phone plan?" There was a pause, a hesitation that lasted 2 seconds too long. She said she was handling the paperwork. Tessa said, "She told us she wanted to make it easy. You know how she is when she gets on a project. She just wants to get it done." "Tessa, being a responsible party means I am liable for the debt." I said, "It means she used my social security number without asking me. Did she ask you?" "Well, yeah, sort of," Tessa said. "She asked for my info a few days ago. She said she was updating her estate planning or something, and then she said she might need it for the phone surprise. I didn't think it was a big deal." "Elle, it is free phones. It is not free. Tessa, it is leverage." "Oh, come on," Tessa sighed. The breeziness evaporated, replaced by the defensive tone of a younger sister who was tired of being told what to do. You are always looking for the trap. Mom is just trying to do something nice. She wants us all on one network so we can share photos and she can feel like she is part of things. She is getting older. She worries. She wants to track us. I said, she told me at dinner, it is about safety settings. So what? Tessa asked. Who cares if she sees I'm at Target? I have nothing to hide. It makes her feel better. And honestly, Elle, having that bill off my plate is huge right now. Leo's braces are costing a fortune. If Mom wants to pay for the data plan in exchange for knowing I am at the grocery store, I am taking the deal. You are selling your privacy for a monthly installment. I said, and you are punishing Lila because you are too proud to let Mom help you. Tessa shot back. The accusation stung. It was the same line Marjorie had used. The script was already circulating. It is not about pride, Tessa. It is about consent. She put my name on a financial contract without asking me. That is illegal. It is family, Tessa said, as if that word was a magic eraser that wiped away laws and boundaries. Just talk to her. Elle, do not make this a thing. Graham and I are already signed up. If you back out now, it makes it weird for everyone. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Tessa was gone. She had taken the bait, swallowed the hook, and was now trying to convince me the water was fine. I needed to see the source. The text message from the night before had come from a service linked to a specific retailer, Lakeview Wireless More. It wasn't a corporate store. It was one of those authorized retailers tucked into strip malls, the kind that sold third-party cases and operated on commission. I grabbed my keys and drove. Lakeview Wireless More was located in a generic plaza about 15 minutes from Marjorie's house, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. The windows were plastered with neon posters advertising free phones and no credit needed. A bell chimed as I pushed the glass door open. The air inside smelled of stale popcorn and ozone. The lighting was aggressive, fluorescent strips humming overhead. The walls were lined with plastic cases in every color, and a high counter ran along the back. A young man was standing behind the register, tapping on a tablet. He looked up as I entered. He was wearing a blue polo shirt that was slightly too tight across the shoulders. "Mrs. Butler," he said brightly. "You made it." I stopped in the middle of the store. I had never met this man in my life. "Excuse me?" I said. He faltered. The smile slipped a fraction of an inch. "Oh, sorry. I thought you were—" "You thought I was who?" I asked, walking up to the counter. "You look just like your mom," he said, recovering quickly. "Marjorie. She was in here yesterday. Said her daughter Eleanor would be coming by to finish up the signatures. I just assumed." He trailed off, looking at my face. I was not wearing the expression of a woman coming to pick up a free gift. I was wearing the expression of a woman who was about to burn the building down. "I am Eleanor Butler." I said, "But I am not here to sign anything. I am here to see the paperwork that was drawn up in my name." The clerk, his name tag read, Josh, shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He looked nervous. He glanced toward a door at the back of the shop marked Employees Only. I cannot really show you the files unless you are signing," he said. "It is a privacy thing. You have a contract with my name on it sitting right there," I said, pointing to a stack of manila folders on the counter behind him. The top one had Butler written on the tab in black marker. Josh instinctively moved to cover the folder with his arm. "Look, Mrs. Butler, your mom said this was all arranged. She said you were just busy with work and that you would swing by to authorize the final lines. We just pre-filled the info to save time." "You pre-filled a credit application?" I asked, "with my social security number?" Josh's eyes darted around the empty store. "You should talk to the manager. Let me get Darren." He disappeared into the back room before I could stop him. While he was gone, I looked around the counter. On a plastic stand next to the register, there was a glossy brochure. The title read, "The Family Safety Bundle. Peace of Mind for the Modern Matriarch." I picked it up. The copy was aggressive. "Do you know who your children are talking to? Do you know where they really are? With the Family Safety Bundle, you hold the keys. Features include real-time GPS tracking, text message mirroring, remote lock capability, and administrator override. Administrator override. The phrase made my skin crawl. It meant the account holder could shut off the phone or access the data, regardless of what the user wanted. It was surveillance packaged as care. The back door opened, and a man walked out. He was older than Josh, maybe in his 40s, with gelled hair and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in a mirror. "Mrs. Butler," he said, extending a hand. "I am Darren Pike, manager here. I understand there is some confusion." I did not shake his hand. I held up the brochure. "There is no confusion. Mr. Pike, my mother, Marjorie Whitaker, was in here yesterday. She set up a plan involving this bundle, and she used my personal information to list me as a responsible party. I am here to tell you that I did not authorize that." Darren chuckled, a low, condescending sound. Now, Marjorie is a wonderful lady. She spent 3 hours in here making sure everything was perfect for her grandkids. She was very clear that this was a family gift. She mentioned you were a little hesitant about technology, but she assured us you were on board with the safety protocols. She lied. I said, "And you accepted a third-party assurance for a financial contract. Is that standard procedure here, Mr. Pike? Or do you just bend the rules for customers buying 5 Pro Maxes?" Darren's smile hardened. The customer service veneer was thin, and I had just scratched right through it. "We have a verbal authorization on file," he said coolly, "and the contract is currently in draft status. Nothing has been finalized for your line. We were just waiting for your signature." I saw a credit inquiry on my file. I said, I bluffed. I hadn't seen it yet, but I knew it was there. Brenda at the carrier had told me. "That is a standard soft check for eligibility," Darren said, waving a hand dismissively. "Look, if you do not want the phone, that is your business. But your mother put a lot of money down on this. She paid for the devices up front. The contract is just for the service and the value-added features, the monitoring." I said, "The safety suite," he corrected. "It is a very popular package. Most parents love it. I am not a parent in this scenario. Mr. Pike, I am the child being monitored, and so is my daughter." I leaned over the counter, invading his personal space. "Delete my information. Right now. I want my name off that folder. I want my social security number scrubbed from your system. If I find out that one single byte of data with my name on it remains in your database, I will not just call the carrier, I will call the Attorney General." Darren stared at me. He assessed me. My clothes, my car keys, the set of my jaw. He decided I was not bluffing. "Fine," he said tightly. He grabbed the folder with Butler on it. He walked over to a shredder in the corner of the kiosk and fed the paper into it. The machine whirred loudly, chewing up the paperwork. "There, gone. Are you happy?" "No," I said, "because it is still in the carrier's digital system. That will purge in 48 hours if you do not sign," he said, turning his back on me. "Have a nice day, Mrs. Butler." I walked out of the store, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had won a skirmish, but the war was vast, and something about Darren Pike's attitude bothered me. He was too defensive, too invested. He hadn't just been selling phones, he had been selling a philosophy, and he and Marjorie seemed to be speaking the exact same language. I drove home in silence. When I walked in the door, the house felt safe, but flimsy. The walls were not thick enough to keep this out. That night, after Lila was asleep and Caleb was watching basketball in the den, I went into my office. I sat down at my computer and logged into my credit monitoring service. I needed to know. I clicked on the Recent Inquiries tab. There it was. A hard inquiry. Dated yesterday. Creditor. LKV. Fin. SVC. /Lakeview Wireless. It was not a soft check. It was a hard check. Darren Pike had lied to my face. A hard check meant they were applying for credit, not just verifying identity. It meant Marjorie hadn't just bought the phones with cash as Darren had implied, or maybe she had, but she was financing the safety bundle or the service contract in a way that required a credit line. My stomach dropped. This was not catastrophic damage. A few points on my score would recover. But it was a fingerprint. It was proof that my mother had walked into a store and impersonated my consent. I picked up my phone. It was 9:15 at night. Marjorie would be in her sunroom, watching her shows. I dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "Hello?" "Mom," I said, "I'm looking at my credit report." There was a silence on the line. Not a confused silence, a waiting silence. "Why is there a hard inquiry from Lakeview Wireless on my report?" I asked. "Oh, Eleanor." Marjorie sighed. Her voice sounded weary, as if I were a toddler refusing to put on my shoes. "Are we really doing this?" "Yes, we are doing this. You used my social security number. You tried to open a line of credit in my name. It is not a line of credit," she snapped. "It is a family plan. And I did not use it. I provided it. There is a difference. I was trying to facilitate things. I knew you would be too busy to go down there yourself. So I told Darren to get the paperwork ready. I was doing you a favor." "A favor?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You tried to make me liable for a contract I never saw. I am paying the bill," Marjorie cried. Her voice took on that familiar, tremulous quality, the victimhood rising to the surface. "I paid for the phones. I am paying the monthly fees. I put you on there so you would have authority, so you could manage Lila's settings if you wanted to. I was trying to include you. You were trying to track us, Mom, and you excluded Lila from the gift giving to punish me. And now I find out you have committed identity theft. How dare you?" she whispered. The venom in her voice was sudden and sharp. "After everything I do for this family, after I spent thousands of dollars to keep your nieces and nephews safe, you accuse me of theft? I am accusing you of crossing a line you have no right to cross. I am your mother," she shouted. "I do not have lines. I have rights. I have a right to know my grandchildren are safe. I have a right to ensure that this family stays together. And you are the one tearing it apart. You are isolating Lila. I am protecting Lila. From what? From a grandmother who loves her?" Marjorie's voice broke. She was crying now, or performing crying. It was always hard to tell. "You are so selfish. Eleanor, you would rather be right than let your daughter have what everyone else has. You would rather humiliate me to a shop manager than just say thank you." I froze. How did she know I spoke to the manager? "You talked to Darren?" I asked. "Of course I talked to him. He called me the minute you left. He was appalled. He said you came in there screaming like a banshee. He asked if you were unstable." I gripped the phone so hard my hand cramped. Darren Pike and my mother, they were a team. "Take my name off the account, Mom, if that inquiry is not reversed. And if my name is not removed from the carrier draft, I will file a formal dispute." "You wouldn't," she challenged. "You wouldn't file a report on your own mother." "Try me," I said. "You are doing this to yourself," she said, her voice turning cold and flat. "Do not blame me when you are on the outside looking in. Do not blame me when Lila asks why she is the only one without a connection." She hung up. I sat in the dark office, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. I felt sick, physically sick. The way she twisted it, the way she made her intrusion feel like my failure, was a masterclass. I walked out to the den. Caleb looked up from the game. He saw my face and muted the TV. "El? What's wrong?" I told him. I told him about the credit check, the store, the conversation with Marjorie. I paced the room as I spoke, waving my hands, trying to burn off the adrenaline. When I finished, Caleb rubbed his face. He looked tired. Caleb was a good man, a steady man, but he had grown up in a family where people knocked before entering rooms and apologized when they bumped into furniture. He did not understand the guerrilla warfare of the Whitakers. "Okay," he said slowly. That is a lot. She definitely shouldn't have done that." "Shouldn't have done that?" "Caleb, she stole my identity. Technically, she just initiated a draft," Caleb said, playing devil's advocate. "I mean, look, I get why you are mad. I do. But is it worth a war?" I stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if we dispute it, It becomes a legal thing. It goes on her record. It causes a huge rift. Maybe we just freeze your credit? We lock it down so she can't do it again, and we just let the application time out? He stood up and put his hands on my shoulders. Elle, she is crazy. We know she is crazy, but she is your mom, and she is Lila's grandma. If we nuke this, if we make it a legal battle, we lose access to everything. Christmas, birthdays, the cousins. Is it worth it over a credit inquiry that we can fix? I looked into his kind, conflict-avoidant eyes. He thought he was being the voice of reason. He thought he was saving the peace, but he didn't see what I saw. It is not just a credit inquiry. Caleb, I whispered, it is the notebook. The what? The notebook she gave Lila. It is the same thing. It is a test. She wants to see how much I will swallow. If I swallow the notebook, she wins. If I swallow the credit check, she wins. And if she wins, she owns us. She owns Lila. Caleb sighed and pulled me into a hug. I think you are tired, honey. I think this triggered a lot of old stuff. Let us just sleep on it. We can decide what to do in the morning. I let him hold me, but I felt stiff in his arms. He wanted peace. I wanted sovereignty. Later that night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan slicing through the shadows. The house was silent, but my mind was loud. I replayed the dinner, the way Marjorie had looked when she handed Lila that notebook, the calm, cutting softness of her voice in the kitchen. Because your rules make it impossible. It wasn't a new voice. I had heard it when I was 16 and wanted to go to art camp instead of the computer science program she had chosen. I am not paying for a hobby. Eleanor, I am paying for a future. I had heard it when I was 22 and brought a boyfriend home she didn't like. He is not welcome at the lake house. We have standards. Her love had always been a transaction. You give me compliance. I give you approval. You give me control. I give you resources. And now, she had updated the currency. It wasn't just tuition or lake house keys anymore. It was data. It was location. It was the digital nervous system of our lives. She had bought 5 iPhone 17 Pro Maxes, not because she was generous, but because they were collars, beautiful, titanium collars. And she was furious, truly, deeply furious, that I wouldn't let her buckle one around Lila's neck. I rolled over and looked at the clock. 3 a.m. The credit inquiry was just the first rattle of the cage. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that she wasn't going to stop. Marjorie Whittaker did not accept no. She only accepted surrender or destruction. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I lay there and prepared myself for the fact that my mother was no longer just my mother. She was the adversary. I needed to understand the architecture of my mother's obsession. It was one thing to be controlling. It was another to be systematic. The morning after the credit inquiry discovery, I drove to the one place in the Whittaker family orbit that felt like a demilitarized zone, my Aunt June's house. June was Marjorie's younger sister, but they were separated by more than just 3 years. June was chaotic, warm, and messy. Her house in the neighboring town of Oak Creek smelled of cinnamon tea and dog hair, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic museum quality of Marjorie's home. I sat at June's scarred oak kitchen table, clutching a ceramic mug. June sat across from me, her graying hair pulled back in a loose clip, watching me with eyes that had seen decades of Marjorie's campaigns. She put a credit inquiry on my report. June, I said, she tried to sign me up as a liable party for a surveillance plan, and when I confronted her, she told me I was the one isolating Lila. June sighed, a long, rattling sound that seemed to come from her chest. She picked up a teaspoon and turned it over and over in her fingers. I am not surprised. Eleanor, I am disappointed, but I am not surprised. Why? I asked. Why is she doing this? It is not just about safety. She spent thousands of dollars on those phones. She is creating a literal network. June hesitated. She looked out the window where her golden retriever was chasing a squirrel. Your mother has always been fixated on proof, June said softly. Proof of what? Legitimacy, belonging. June looked back at me. Do you remember the scandal with Uncle Arthur? Back in the 80s? I shook my head. I was a baby. Well, it was a mess. There were rumors about paternity, about who really belonged to the family trust and who didn't. It humiliated Marjorie. She was just starting her social climb. And suddenly there were whispers that the Whittaker bloodline wasn't as pure as the letterhead suggested. June took a sip of tea. Ever since then, Marjorie has had this tic. She needs to know that the people around her are locked in, verified. She talks about loyalty, but what she really means is ownership. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty window. A few years ago, June continued, keeping her voice low. Marjorie came to me with a plastic bag. She asked me to help her get samples. Samples? I asked. Hair, June said. From hairbrushes. She wanted to run a genealogy kit, but not just on herself. She wanted to test Graham's kids. And Lila. I set my mug down. The ceramic made a loud clack against the wood. She wanted to DNA test my daughter without my permission. She said it was for a family tree project. June said, she said she wanted to frame a chart for Christmas, but the way she asked, she wanted me to go into your bathroom during Thanksgiving and pull hair from Lila's brush. She said, quote, I just want to be sure everything is correct. And you refused? Of course I refused. I told her it was grotesque. June looked down at her hands. She didn't speak to me for 6 months, and I suspect she found a way to do it anyway. Maybe not with Lila, because you are so careful. But the others? I would bet my pension she has a file somewhere proving they are all biologically hers. I felt sick. A deep, oily nausea roiled in my stomach. It wasn't just about the invasion of privacy. It was the commodification of people. To Marjorie, we weren't family members with souls and autonomy. We were assets. We were livestock to be tagged, tracked, and verified. The phones, I whispered, they are the new tags. Exactly, June said. She is not worried about Lila getting lost. Eleanor, she is worried about Lila getting away. I left June's house feeling like the ground under my feet had turned to glass. I realized then that I was not dealing with a simple case of an overbearing grandmother. I was dealing with a woman who viewed her family as a corporation, and she was the CEO conducting an audit. The cruelty I had witnessed at the dinner, the notebook, the exclusion, was not an emotional outburst. It was a corporate restructuring. Lila was being put on a performance improvement plan. I needed professional perspective. I couldn't dump this all on Caleb. He was already overwhelmed, and his instinct was to smooth things over. I needed someone to tell me if I was the crazy one. I made an emergency appointment with Dr. Mallory Keene, a therapist in Briar Glen who specialized in family dynamics. I had seen her a few times after my father died, and I trusted her neutrality. Dr. Keene's office was quiet, painted in soft blues and grays. I sat on the couch and poured it all out. The iPhones, the notebook, the tracking, the credit check, the hairbrush story. I spoke for 20 minutes without stopping, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. When I finished, Dr. Keene was silent for a moment. She adjusted her glasses. Eleanor, she said calmly, I want you to take a breath. I inhaled. It was shaky. You are describing a pattern of conditional love. Doctor, Keene said, in healthy family systems, belonging is a birthright. You belong because you exist. In the system you are describing, belonging is a wage. It is earned through compliance. But she makes it look so nice, I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. She calls it safety. She buys expensive gifts. Everyone thinks I'm the problem because I won't just say thank you. That is how the dynamic protects itself. Doctor, Keene explained, if the control is wrapped in generosity, rejecting the control looks like ingratitude. It is a very effective trap. The message being sent to your daughter is not, I love you. The message is I love the version of you that follows my rules. She leaned forward. The danger here is not that Lila doesn't have a phone. The danger is that she is being taught that her worth is negotiable. That is what you need to shield her from. How? I asked. How do I shield her without cutting her off completely? Marjorie is still her grandmother. You have to be the interpreter. Doctor, Keene said, you cannot pretend nothing happened. Children know when they are being excluded. You have to validate her reality. Grandma made a choice that was hurtful. That choice was about Grandma's rules, not about your value. You have to be the wall that the waves break against. Eleanor. I left the session with a clearer head, but a heavier heart. I knew what I had to do. I had to hold the line, but the universe, or perhaps just the small town of Briar Glen, was not done with the revelations. 2 days later, my brother Graham called me. Can we meet? He asked. He sounded wrecked. We met in the parking lot of the grocery store halfway between our houses. It was raining, a gray, miserable drizzle that matched the mood. Graham got into my passenger seat. He looked 10 years older than 35. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he smelled like stale coffee. I signed the papers. "Elle," he said, staring out the windshield at the shopping carts. "I know," I said gently. "I saw the text. I didn't want to." He said, the phones are nice, and the kids are happy, but I know it is weird. I know the tracking is intense. Then why did you do it?" Graham turned to look at me. His face was crumpled with shame. "She offered me a bonus." "A bonus? Like cash?" Graham nodded. "She knows about the car payments. The transmission on the van blew last month, and we put it on a credit card with 24% interest. We are drowning." "Elle," he rubbed his face. "She told me that if I got the family on the plane, if I showed enthusiasm and helped get Tessa on board, she would clear the credit card. She called it a vendor incentive. She said she gets perks for having multiple lines, and she would pass the savings to me." I stared at him. "She paid you to sell out your privacy?" "She paid me to survive." Graham snapped, then slumped back. "Look, I know how it sounds, but $3,000 is life-changing for us right now, and she told me—" He hesitated. "She told you what?" "She told me not to tell you. She said, 'Do not tell Eleanor. She will overreact. She will make it about principles when it is really just about business.'" I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. It was not a hot, fiery rage. It was the cold, hard anger of a judge handing down a sentence. "She is buying you, Graham, piece by piece." "I know," he whispered, "but I can't afford to say no." "You can. You have Caleb's income. You have the trust from Dad's side that didn't get merged. I have nothing." He opened the door to get out. "I just wanted you to know." He said, "I am not against you. Elle, I am just stuck." He ran through the rain to his car. I sat there for a long time. Vendor incentive. That phrase stuck in my mind. It was the same corporate language Marjorie had used at dinner. Game changer. Network. Why would a grandmother call a gift to her son a vendor incentive? Unless it literally was one. I drove home and went straight to my laptop. I had access to a shared Dropbox folder from 3 years ago when I helped Marjorie refinance her house. She had probably forgotten I still had the login. I didn't know if she was still uploading documents there, but Marjorie was a creature of habit. She digitized everything. I logged in. The folder structure was the same: taxes, medical, property. I clicked on a new folder labeled 2026, projects. Inside, there was a subfolder, Connectivity Initiative. I opened it. There were PDFs of the carrier contracts, but there was also a spreadsheet. I opened the spreadsheet. It was a ledger. Date: January 20th. Item: Lakeview Wireless Activation. 5 lines. Cost: $6,200. Credit: Vendor Incentive / Affiliate Program. Pike Enterprises. Amount: $1,500. I blinked. Marjorie had received $1,500 back from Darren Pike's company. I kept reading. Date: January 21st. Item: Referral Bonus. Level 2. Amount: $500. I scrolled down to the notes section. Notes: Darren confirms admin access active upon signature. Data harvesting authorized for Pike Enterprises marketing research per safety bundle agreement. The room spun. It wasn't just a phone plan, it was a business arrangement. Marjorie had entered into a deal with Darren Pike. She bought the hardware up front. Yes, but by signing us up for the safety bundle, she was enrolling us in a data harvesting scheme. Darren Pike, and presumably Lakeview Wireless, was paying her a kickback for bringing in 5 high-value data streams. That was why she needed the signatures. That was why she needed the responsible party designation. It wasn't just about control. It was about the contract she had signed with Pike. She was effectively selling our user data, our location, our usage habits, our browsing history, to a third-party marketing firm disguised as a safety app. And she was using the kickback money to bribe Graham. It was a pyramid scheme of privacy violations. I took screenshots. I downloaded the files. I saved everything to an external hard drive. Then, I looked at the technical specifications document in the folder. Safety Bundle Tier 3. Administrator Privileges. The account owner retains the right to 1. View real-time location. 2. Access text logs and call history. 3. Remotely disable device. 4. View screen time and app usage. 5. Override user passwords. It was a digital panopticon. If I had signed that paper, Marjorie could have unlocked my phone, read my texts to my husband, seen my banking apps, and shut the whole thing down if I didn't call her back fast enough. I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was clarity. I was not the crazy one. I was the target. 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I checked the camera. The aggressive, cheerful cadence of the ring gave it away. I walked to the door. I didn't open it immediately. I took a breath, centered myself, and unlocked the deadbolt. Marjorie stood on the porch. She was holding a bright yellow gift bag, the kind with smiley faces on it. It looked manic against the gray siding of my house. "Eleanor," she chirped. "May I come in? It is freezing out here." She tried to step past me, but I didn't move. I stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "What do you want?" "Mom?" She blinked, her smile faltering slightly. "I come bearing peace offerings." "Is Lila home?" "She is in her room." I said, "And she is staying there." Marjorie's face tightened. She held up the bag. "I brought her something. I realized I was perhaps too harsh the other night. I wanted to give her the phone, no strings attached." She thrust the bag toward me. I looked at the bag. I knew exactly what was in there. An iPhone 17 Pro Max, a device that was already registered in the spreadsheet I had just seen. A device that was linked to the Pike Enterprises data harvesting agreement. "No strings attached?" I asked. "So, you removed the safety bundle? You canceled the admin access? You took my name off the carrier draft?" Marjorie let out a sharp little laugh. "Oh, Eleanor, do not be technical. I am offering the device. I am letting her have the fun. The back-end details are just administrative. They do not concern an 8-year-old. They concern her mother." I said, "I know about the kickbacks." "Mom." The color drained from Marjorie's face. It happened instantly, like a shutter closing. "I beg your pardon?" I saw the spreadsheet. Vendor incentive, Pike Enterprises. "You are getting paid to sign us up for that monitoring service. You are selling our data to Darren Pike's side hustle so you can play matriarch and get a discount." Marjorie lowered the bag. The smiley faces crumpled. "You invaded my privacy," she hissed. "You tried to sell mine," I countered. "I am looking out for this family," she shouted, abandoning the whisper. "The world is dangerous. I am creating a safety net. And yes, if I get a financial incentive for bringing 5 lines to a small business, that is just smart economics. It pays for the plan. It helps your brother. It is exploitation," I said calmly. I stepped back and started to close the door. "I am not signing. Mom, I am not joining the plan, and Lila is not taking that phone." Marjorie stepped forward, jamming her foot in the doorframe. Her expensive loafer blocked the latch. "You listen to me. Eleanor Butler. You think you are being noble, but you are being a fool. Everyone else is inside. Everyone else is protected. Protected? I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. You are not protecting them. You are farming them. Marjorie's eyes went flat. The mask was gone entirely now. There was no grandmother left, just the CEO. If you do not take this bag, she said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly even tone. You are choosing to be an outsider. I will not chase you. I will not beg you. But when we go on vacations, when we have dinners, when the cousins are all on the group chat laughing and sharing their lives, you will not be there. Lila will not be there. She leaned in close, her perfume cloying and sweet. I control the network, Eleanor, and if you are not a node on my network, you do not exist. I looked at the bag. I looked at her foot in my door. I would rather be invisible than owned. I said. I looked pointedly at her foot. Move it. Or I call the police and report a trespasser. Marjorie stared at me. She searched my face for a crack, for the daughter who used to apologize for existing. She didn't find her. She pulled her foot back. Then do not expect to be included, she said. She turned and walked down the path, the yellow bag swinging by her side. She didn't look back. She got into her pristine SUV, checked her mirror, and drove away. I closed the door and locked it. Then I threw the deadbolt. Then I engaged the security chain. I leaned my forehead against the cold wood of the door. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I had drawn the line. I had protected Lila. But as the silence of the house settled around me, I realized the terrifying truth of Marjorie's threat. She wasn't just going to stop calling. She was going to erase us. The shunning had begun, and it would be as organized and efficient as everything else she did. I walked into the kitchen and saw the calendar on the wall. Next week was my nephew Leo's birthday party. I wondered if the invitation would still arrive. And then I remembered the document I had seen at the very bottom of the Dropbox folder. The one I hadn't opened yet because the file name was just a string of numbers. I went back to my laptop. I needed to see everything. I clicked on the file. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a scan of a letter from a law firm. Whitaker Family Trust Services. Amendment to Estate Distribution. Date, January 22nd. Dear Mrs. Whitaker, per your instruction, we have prepared the draft to restructure the beneficiary schedule. The Grandchildren Technology Fund has been established. Access to future trust disbursements for the grandchildren will be contingent upon active participation in the Family Safety Protocol. I read it twice. She wasn't just using the phones to track them now. She was tying their inheritance to it. She was weaponizing the future. If Lila didn't have the phone, Lila didn't get the college fund. The war hadn't just begun. It had gone nuclear. The weeks that followed my confrontation with Marjorie were not filled with shouting matches or dramatic showdowns. That would have been too messy, too loud for the Whitaker brand. Instead, the retaliation came in the form of a slow, polite erasure. It was a silence that accumulated like snow, muffling the edges of our existence until I began to wonder if we were still visible to the rest of the family at all. It started with the photographs. I made the mistake of checking social media on a Tuesday afternoon. There, on my sister Tessa's feed, was a gallery titled Sunday Brunch with the Best People. I clicked through the images. There was Marjorie, presiding over a table laden with quiche and mimosas. There was Graham, looking less tired than usual, holding up his new iPhone 17 Pro Max to take a selfie with Tessa. There were the kids, Leo, Sam, Bella, heads bent together over their screens, their faces illuminated by the blue light of the devices I had refused. Lila was not there. I was not there. We had not been invited. But it was the caption that twisted the knife. So grateful for family time where everyone is connected. Love us. I put the phone down, feeling a familiar, hollow ache in my chest. It was high school all over again. The cool table laughing while I sat alone in the library. But this time, the mean girl was my mother, and the person being shunned was my 8-year-old daughter. 2 days later, A heavy cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. It was an invitation to my niece Bella's dance recital. I opened it, relieved. See? I told myself. It's not a total freeze-out. Then I looked at the date. Saturday, February 14th. I looked at the calendar on my kitchen wall. Today was Monday, February 16th. The postmark on the envelope was dated the 13th. Marjorie had mailed it the day before the event. She had sent it so that it would arrive perfectly, politely late, allowing her to claim she had invited us while ensuring we could not possibly attend. I could hear her voice in my head. Oh, Eleanor, did it not arrive in time? The mail is so unreliable these days. We missed you. Lila would have loved the costumes. It was gaslighting by postage stamp. I did not call to ask what happened. I knew the script. Instead, I picked up the phone and called the number I had found on a legal aid website the night before. Nadia Cross was a consumer rights attorney based in Hawthorne County. Her office was in a converted brick warehouse that smelled of old paper and strong coffee. Nadia herself was sharp-angled and direct, a woman who looked like she did not have time for emotional nuances. I sat in her office, clutching a folder of printed screenshots, the text messages, the credit inquiry, the carrier draft email. I laid them out on her desk like tarot cards. So, Nadia said, picking up the credit report, let me get this straight. Your mother used your Social Security number to open a multi-line account, listed you as a responsible party without your signature, and is now freezing you out socially because you caught her? That is the summary. Yes, I said. Nadia leaned back in her chair. Okay, let us separate the feelings from the facts. The feelings are that your mother is a manipulator who uses money to control access. That is painful, but it is not illegal. Being a bad grandmother is not a crime. She tapped the paper with a manicured fingernail. However, using someone's personal identification to secure a service contract without their consent? That is fraud. Identity theft. Even if she paid the bill, even if she meant well, the law does not have a "but she is my mom" exception. I felt a wave of validation wash over me. It was the first time someone had said it out loud without adding a caveat. What are my options? I asked. Nadia ticked them off on her fingers. 1. We file a police report for identity theft. This will trigger a fraud alert on your credit file. It will also likely launch a criminal investigation into whoever opened the account. If the store clerk knowingly processed it without you present, he is liable. If your mother impersonated you, she is liable. I flinched. A police report meant officers at Marjorie's door. It meant handcuffs. I was angry, but I wasn't ready to see my mother in a mugshot. Option 2. Nadia continued. Seeing my reaction, we go the civil route. We send a formal demand letter to the carrier and the retailer, revoking authorization and demanding the removal of your data. We dispute the inquiry with the credit bureaus, and we place a freeze on your credit report so nothing new can be opened. I want option 2. I said quickly. Nadia nodded. Prudent? But Eleanor, you need to understand something. The responsible party listing is the dangerous part. She pulled the carrier contract draft toward her. This isn't just a backup contact. In these business tier contracts, the responsible party is often granted administrative rights, but they also shoulder joint and several liability. That means if your mother decides to stop paying the bill, say out of spite, or if she passes away, the debt becomes yours immediately. All of it, the devices, the termination fees, the service charges. We are talking about $10,000 of potential exposure. I felt the blood drain from my face. $10,000. You need to document everything, Nadia said. Every text, every email, every weird interaction. If she escalates, you will need a timeline to prove a pattern of coercion. I left her office with a plan. I went home and drafted the email. I spent an hour editing it, stripping away every adjective, every ounce of emotion. I wanted it to be a document that could be read in a courtroom without embarrassment. Subject: Account authorization and personal data removal. Marjorie. This email is to formally request the immediate removal of my name, Social Security number, and personal information from the Lakeview Wireless account and any associated carrier agreements. I did not authorize these actions. I am also requesting a written confirmation from you that this has been completed by Friday. Furthermore, please cease using gifts or financial incentives as leverage to pressure me or Lila into participating in data tracking plans. We are happy to visit, but our privacy is not negotiable. Eleanor. I hit send. My hand was shaking. The response came 3 hours later. It did not address the legal points. It did not apologize. It was a single line. You are doing this to yourself. I stared at the screen. It was the ultimate deflection. In Marjorie's world, my resistance was the aggression. Her violation was just love. I was too broken to accept. I didn't reply. I printed the email and filed it in the binder Nadia had told me to buy. That evening, Tessa called. Elle, seriously? She said the moment I picked up, Mom is a wreck. She says you are threatening to sue her? I am not suing her. Tessa, I am asking her to take my name off a contract I didn't sign. Why is that so hard for everyone to understand? Because you are making it a federal case, Tessa shouted. Her voice sounded frayed, thin with stress. Look, I get it. She overstepped. She always oversteps. But that is just how she is. You know that. Why do you have to blow it up now? Because she is tracking you. Tessa, I told you. She is selling the data to Darren Pike. Oh my God. Stop with the conspiracy theories. Tessa groaned. Who cares? Honestly, Eleanor, who cares if some guy in a strip mall knows I buy diapers at Walmart? It is worth it for the free phones. Do you know how much money this saved me? I do, actually, I said quietly. I know exactly how much. You are ruining the vibe. Elle, Tessa said, her voice dropping to a plea. We were going to plan a trip to the lake for spring break. Mom was talking about renting a boat. Now she says she doesn't want to go if there is legal tension. You are punishing the cousins. Leo misses Lila. I felt a sharp pang of guilt. Leo and Lila were best friends. They had grown up like siblings. Then bring Leo over. I said, you can drop him off here. They can play in the yard. No phones, no tracking. Just kids. Tessa sighed. I can't. Mom wants us all to go to the club for dinner on Saturday. If I bring Leo to your house instead, she will take it as a betrayal. I can't afford to fight her right now. Elle, I just can't. Please, just let it go for the kids. I hung up the phone and sat in the dark kitchen. Let it go for the kids. That was the mantra. That was the mortar that held the Whitaker family walls together. We all had to swallow the poison so the children could have the sugar. But I realized, with a clarity that hurt, that the peace Tessa was fighting for wasn't peace. It was appeasement. The family was a hostage situation. And Marjorie was the one holding the detonator. I was the only one who had stopped negotiating. 2 days later, the war moved from the emotional to the financial. I was at work, reviewing a deposition summary, when my phone buzzed with a notification from my banking app. Alert. Scheduled transaction declined. Merchant. Lakeview Wireless/Carrier Autopay. Amount, $412. Reason. Invalid account number. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had not given them my bank account information. I had never shopped at Lakeview Wireless. The only way they could have attempted a draft was if someone had manually entered my routing and account numbers into their payment system. I thought back to the refinance 3 years ago. Marjorie had copies of my voided checks. She had files. She had tried to set up the autopay using my account, but she had failed. Why? Invalid account number. I realized then that I had switched checking accounts 2 years ago after a data breach at my old bank. Marjorie had the old numbers. She had tried to connect the phone bill, the bill for 5 iPhones and a tracking service, to my bank account. Assuming the information she had on file was still current, she wasn't just making me a liable party, she was trying to make me pay for my own surveillance. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was so brazen, so criminal, that I almost couldn't process it. I didn't call her. Calling her gave her supply. Calling her gave her a chance to say, "Oh, it must have been a clerical error. Eleanor, you are so dramatic." Instead, I printed the bank alert. I added it to the binder. Then I grabbed my coat. I was going back to the store. I arrived at Lakeview Wireless at 11 in the morning on a Thursday. I knew Darren Pike wouldn't be there. He usually managed his other ventures in the mornings. I was counting on finding Josh, the nervous clerk from my first visit. The store was empty. Josh was behind the counter, scrolling on his phone. When the door chimed, he looked up, and his face went pale. "Mrs. Butler," he stammered. We destroyed the file. I swear. I walked up to the counter. I was calm. I was terrifyingly calm. "I know you shredded the paper folder, Josh, but someone tried to run a bank draft on my account yesterday." Josh swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. That wasn't me. That is the automated system. When the primary holder sets up the family group, they can input backup funding sources. My mother put in my bank info? Josh looked down at his shoes. "She had a check. She said you wanted to split the bill. She said you were helping out." I leaned over the counter. "Josh, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am building a police file. I have a lawyer, and right now, you are the one who processed a transaction with stolen financial data." Josh's eyes went wide. "I didn't know it was stolen. She is your mom," she said. "What did she say?" "Josh?" I asked, my voice dropping. What did she actually say when she was setting this up? Why was she so insistent that Lila be left out? Josh looked around the empty store, checking for cameras, checking for Darren. He whispered. She said the little girl needed to learn a lesson. A lesson? Yeah. She was talking to Darren. She said you were obstinate. She said the only way to get you to fall in line was to make the kid feel it. He paused, shifting his weight. She didn't use the word safety. Mrs. Butler. Not when she was talking to Darren. She used the word discipline. She said, "This plan is the ultimate discipline tool. Once they are on the network, I own the environment." I felt the air leave the room. I own the environment. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about connection. It was about owning the ecosystem in which her family lived. She wanted to be the god of the Whitaker universe, seeing every movement, hearing every prayer, punishing every sin, and Lila was the heretic who had to be broken. I stepped back from the counter. "Thank you. Josh, wait, are you going to call the cops on me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Not today." I said, "But if I were you, I would find a new job. Darren Pike is going to get you indicted." I walked out of the store. The rain had started again. A cold, miserable drizzle that soaked into my coat. I sat in my car and opened my notebook. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to write. Date: February 19th. Location: Lakeview Wireless. Witness: Josh, clerk. Statement: confirmed Marjorie provided banking info from old check. Confirmed intent was discipline, not safety. Quote: once they are on the network, I own the environment. I looked at the words on the page. They looked cold, clinical. I felt a surge of guilt. This was my mother. This was the woman who had bandaged my knees, who had paid for my wedding dress. Was I really doing this? Was I really documenting her crimes like a detective building a case against a stranger? The guilt was a heavy, wet blanket. It told me I was ungrateful. It told me I was the problem. Then I remembered Dr. Keene's voice. Guilt is the tax you pay for freedom. And I remembered Josh's voice. She said the little girl needed to learn a lesson. I closed the notebook. The guilt did not disappear, but I shoved it into the back seat. I had a daughter to protect. The next Saturday was Lila's belonging day. I had invented the concept after the dinner. If Marjorie was going to exclude her, I was going to flood her with inclusion. But I didn't want to buy her things. I didn't want to fight materialism with materialism. I wanted to fight it with reality. I invited 3 of Lila's friends from school, not cousins, not family, just kids who liked her for who she was, not for whose bloodline she carried. We made pizzas from scratch. The kitchen was a disaster zone of flour and tomato sauce. I let them make a mess. I let them be loud. Lila was laughing. her face smeared with flour, trying to toss dough into the air and failing spectacularly. "Mom, look, it's a cloud!" she screamed as the dough landed on her head. I laughed with her, real laughter, not the polite, tight-lipped chuckle of the Whitaker dining room. For 4 hours, there were no screens, no tracking, no one checking a location app to see if we were safe. We were just safe. We were safe because we were together, and because the door was locked against the people who wanted to measure us, as the friends left, picked up by parents who smiled and waved, normal parents, who didn't demand admin access to their children's lives. Lila turned to me. "Mom? Yeah. Baby? This was better than a phone," she said. I knelt down and hugged her, burying my face in her flour-dusted hair. "I know. Sweetie, I know." I felt a fierce, protective victory. I had created a bubble, a small, imperfect bubble where Lila was enough, but bubbles are fragile. Monday morning. The mail arrived. I was sorting through the bills when I saw the envelope. It was thick, expensive linen paper. The return address was embossed in gold. Whitaker Family Trust Services. My stomach clenched. This wasn't a party invitation. This was legal correspondence. I opened it with a letter opener. My fingers numb. Inside was a document titled Notice of Amendment to Revocable Living Trust. I scanned the legalese. Grantor, Marjorie Whitaker. My eyes skipped down to the section highlighted in yellow. Effective immediately, the distribution schedule for the Whitaker Family Trust has been updated. A new subtrust, hereby referred to as the Grandchildren Technology and Education Fund, has been established. Beneficiaries of this subtrust are subject to enrollment and good standing in the Family Connectivity Protocol. And then, at the bottom, under the list of parties of interest, was my name, Eleanor Butler. I hadn't asked to be included. I had asked to be removed. I had demanded, in writing, to be taken off all accounts. But here I was. I read the fine print. As a party of interest and legal guardian of a potential beneficiary, Leila Butler. Eleanor Butler is hereby notified that failure to comply with the connectivity protocol will result in the forfeiture of all educational disbursements for said beneficiary. She had done it. She had codified the blackmail. It wasn't just about the phones anymore. She was holding Lila's college fund hostage. She was saying, effectively, "Give me the data, give me the access, give me the control, or I will cut your daughter's future." I looked at the document. It was a declaration of war signed in calligraphy. Marjorie hadn't just ignored my boundary. She had built a toll booth on top of it. I reached for my phone to call Nadia, but stopped. My name was listed as a party of interest. I realized with a jolt of horror that in the world of trusts and estates, a party of interest often had the right to audit the trust's activities to ensure the grantor wasn't being coerced or defrauded. Marjorie had included me to threaten me, but in doing so, she had legally opened a door she didn't know was there. She thought she was locking me out, but she had just given me a key to the room where the secrets were kept. I picked up the phone. "Nadia." I said when she answered, "Do not file the cease and desist yet." "Why?" Nadia asked. "Because I just got a letter from the trust." I said, staring at the gold embossing, "And I think I found the leverage." Whitaker Family Trust Services was located in a building that smelled of old leather and quiet money. It was one of those places where the carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of your footsteps, and the receptionist spoke in hushed tones, as if discussing wealth was a religious experience. I walked in at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, my stomach tight with a mixture of dread and adrenaline. I wasn't here for a handout. I was here for an audit. I had used the party of interest notification as my ticket in. When I called to schedule the appointment, the receptionist had hesitated, likely seeing a flag on my file, but the legal reality was on my side. If I was named in the trust documents, I had a right to review the terms that applied to me. I was shown into a conference room that overlooked the manicured town square of Hawthorne County. A man I didn't recognize was waiting for me. He looked to be in his late 30s, wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny and a watch that was definitely too big. "Mrs. Butler," he said, standing up and extending a hand that was damp with sweat. "I am Elliot Rains. I have taken over the day-to-day management of your mother's account since Mr. Henderson retired." I shook his hand briefly. "Mr. Rains, I want to see the amendment, the one regarding the Grandchildren Technology Fund." Elliot Rains looked nervous. He shuffled the papers in front of him, his eyes darting to the door as if he hoped Marjorie would burst in and save him. "Right," he said, clearing his throat. "The amendment. It is a standard update. Mrs. Butler, your mother, Marjorie, is a very forward-thinking woman. She wanted to ensure that her estate was keeping pace with the digital age." He slid a document across the polished mahogany table. I picked it up. The title was innocuous enough: The Whitaker Family Digital Wellness and Education Initiative. But the content was a manifesto of control. I read the preamble. "The purpose of this fund is to support the educational and technological advancement of the Whitaker grandchildren, provided they remain within the protective custody of the Family Safety Protocol." I looked up at Rains. "Define protective custody. It is a term defined in the appendix." He said quickly, "It refers to the family's unified communications plan, essentially, to qualify for tuition assistance, technology grants, or travel stipends from the trust. The beneficiary, that is, the grandchild, must be an active user on the primary family account." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. "So, if my daughter is not on the tracking plan, she does not get money for college?" "It is not just the tracking plan," Rains corrected, though he looked pained to say it. "It is about compliance with safety standards. Marjorie feels very strongly that responsible digital citizenship is a prerequisite for financial maturity." I looked back at the document. "And why is my name listed here?" "I am not a grandchild." Rains hesitated. He picked up a pen and clicked it, then clicked it again. "Well, as the parent of a minor beneficiary, your consent is required for enrollment. But what?" I pressed. "Marjorie structured the initial funding of this subtrust using a consolidated family profile," Rains said. His voice dropped. "To establish the projected growth of the fund. We had to verify the number of dependents and their legal guardians. Your information was used to validate the family tree structure for the insurance underwriters." "Insurance underwriters?" I asked. "What insurance?" Rains looked like he wanted to vanish into the carpet. "The fund is backed by a life insurance policy," he murmured. "A policy that includes riders for digital liability. Marjorie took out policies on all the grandchildren to protect them from cyberbullying, identity theft, that sort of thing. And to do that, she used my social security number. She used the family data she had on file to verify relationships," Rains said, retreating into vagueness. "It is a standard underwriting procedure." "Mrs. Butler," I stood up, "it is not standard to take out insurance policies on my child or use my identity to secure them without my signature. Show me the signature page." "Mr. Rains," he froze. "I cannot release the full underwriting file without the grantor's permission." He said, "You can release the parts that have my name on them," I said, leaning over the table, "or I can come back with a subpoena." Rains sighed. He opened a folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a beneficiary verification form. There, in the block for legal guardian, was my name, and next to it, in the signature box, was a scrawl that looked vaguely like mine, but tighter, more angular. It was Marjorie's handwriting attempting to be mine. I stared at it. The room seemed to tilt. This wasn't just about tracking location anymore. She was building a financial ecosystem where she owned the insurance. The data, the inheritance, and the access. The iPhones were just the intake valve. They were the pilot program for a machine designed to digest her family and turn us into assets she could manage. "I want a copy of this." I said, "I cannot let you take the original." Rains stammered. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the document before he could cover it. "Mrs. Butler," he protested. I walked to the door. "Tell my mother I saw it. Elliot, tell her the audit has begun." I walked out of the building into the cold February air. My hands were shaking, but not from cold. I felt a profound sense of violation. She had forged my signature. She had insured my daughter like a car. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel. I needed to know how deep this went. If she was using money to buy compliance, she wasn't just targeting me. She was targeting the weak links. I thought of Graham, my brother who was driving a van with a bad transmission. My brother who had looked like a ghost in the grocery store parking lot. I drove straight to Graham's house. Graham lived in a subdivision that had been nice 20 years ago but was now starting to fray around the edges. There was a rusting basketball hoop in the driveway and a pile of uncollected mail on the porch. I banged on the door. Graham answered in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking startled. "Elle, what are you doing here? We need to talk." "Graham, now." I pushed past him into the living room. It was cluttered with toys and laundry. The TV was blaring cartoons, but the kids weren't in the room. I saw the trust documents. "Graham," I said, turning to face him, "I saw the insurance policies. I know about the college fund being tied to the tracking app." Graham rubbed his face. He looked exhausted. He collapsed onto the sofa as if his strings had been cut. "She told you?" he asked. "I found out." I corrected. "Graham, did you sign the insurance waivers? Did you let her take out a policy on your kids?" Graham looked at the floor. "It is for their protection." "Elle, that is what she said. It covers cyberstalking. It covers her control," I shouted. "Graham, she forged my signature on the verification. Did she forge yours? Or did you sell it to her?" Graham flinched. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. I didn't have a choice. "Elle, you don't understand. Make me understand." I said. "Leo made the travel team," Graham said, his voice cracking. "For soccer, it is $3,000 for the season, plus the travel, plus the gear. We were going to have to pull him out." He was crushed. He cried for 2 days. He took a breath. Marjorie found out. She came over. She said she would cover the whole season. She said she would set up a stipend for sports, but she said the money had to come from the family fund, and to access the fund, we had to be verified on the network. "So you sold your son's privacy for soccer cleats?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It is not just cleats," Graham yelled, standing up. "It is his life. It is his happiness. You sit there in your house with 2 incomes and your husband's steady job and you judge me. You don't know what it is like to look your kid in the eye and say, 'No, you can't be great because daddy is broke.'" He was crying now, ugly, desperate tears. She offered me a way out. "Elle," she said, "if I signed the papers, and if I helped bring you into the fold, she would pay off the van too." I stared at him. The betrayal hit me in the chest like a physical blow. "You were working for her," I whispered. "When you told me to just sign, when you told me I was overreacting, you were trying to earn your commission. I was trying to survive." Graham sobbed. "She told me the only reason Lila was excluded was because you were being difficult. She said if I could just convince you to sign, she would unlock the fund for everyone. She made it sound like I was helping you, like I was fixing the family. She weaponized you." "Graham," I said, my voice cold, "she used your poverty to turn you into her enforcer." "I know," he whispered. "I know. But Elle, the money is real. The check's cleared. Leo is playing. The van is fixed. And what happens when she decides she doesn't like Leo's grades?" I asked. "Or when she decides she doesn't like who you voted for? Does she turn off the money then? Does she revoke the insurance?" Graham didn't answer. He just sat there, defeated. I walked to the door. I felt a mix of pity and disgust. "You sold them, Graham," I said. "And the worst part is, you sold them cheap." I left him crying on his couch and drove home. I felt hollowed out. My family wasn't a family anymore. It was a subsidiary of Marjorie Whittaker Enterprises, and the employees were terrified of losing their benefits. I went into my office and called Nadia. "Send the letter." I said, "Send it now," and add a paragraph about forged signatures on insurance documents. Nadia didn't ask questions. She just typed. 2 days later, the fallout began. I received a notification from my own carrier, my real one, not the Lakeview plan, that my number had been flagged for a poured-out request. Someone had tried to transfer my number to the Whitaker business account without my permission. I called and locked it down, putting a passcode on my account that was 20 characters long. Then, I drove past Lakeview Wireless. The store was dark. A sign on the door said, "Closed for inventory." Nadia's letter had landed. The threat of a fraud investigation had spooked Darren Pike. He had gone to ground. I felt a grim satisfaction. I was fighting back. I was disrupting the supply line, but a wounded predator is dangerous. That evening, my phone rang. It was Marjorie. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. I stared at the screen. "Mom." I answered on the third try. I didn't say hello. I just listened. "Eleanor?" Her voice was wet, thick with tears. "Eleanor, please don't hang up. What do you want?" "Mom? I got the letter from your lawyer," she sobbed. "How could you? How could you accuse me of fraud? I was building a legacy for you. You forged my signature. Mom, you took out insurance on my daughter. You tried to steal my phone number. That is not a legacy. That is a crime." "It was a placeholder," she cried. "I was going to have you sign the real one later. I just needed to secure the rates. Stop lying." I said, "I am done with the lies. I am done with the secret funds and the vendor incentives and the bribes you are paying Graham." There was a silence on the line. The tears stopped abruptly. "You talked to Graham?" "Yes. I know everything. I know about the car payments. I know about the sports stipend. I know you are buying them. I am supporting them," she snapped, the anger cutting through the performance. "Because they let me. Because they understand loyalty. Unlike you." She took a ragged breath. Then her voice shifted again. It became soft, terrified. "Eleanor, you have to meet me. You have to let me explain. It is not just about the money. It is about Lila. What about Lila? I excluded her for a reason." Marjorie whispered, "A real reason. Not just to punish you. I did it to protect her." "Bullshit. It is not bullshit. There is something you don't know. Something about the family history, about Lila's risk profile." My stomach clenched. "Risk profile? I can't say it over the phone," Marjorie said. "It is too sensitive. Please, Eleanor, I am begging you. Meet me. Let me show you the file. If you see it, you will understand why I need to monitor her. You will thank me." I gripped the phone. I knew it was a hook. I knew she was baiting me with the one thing she knew I couldn't resist, a threat to my child. But I also knew Marjorie. She mixed truth with lies like a chemist. There was always a grain of reality in the poison. "Where?" I asked. "Maple and Main Cafe," she said. "Tomorrow at 10. It is public. It is safe. Just you and me." "Please." "Fine," I said. "But if you try to get me to sign anything, I leave." I hung up. I didn't trust her for a second. "Caleb," I said, walking into the living room, "I need you to take the morning off tomorrow." The next morning, the sky was the color of a bruise. Maple and Main Cafe was a trendy spot in downtown Briar Glen, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. It was neutral ground. I parked my car a block away. Caleb parked his truck across the street. He had instructions. If I wasn't out in 45 minutes, or if I texted the code word storm, he was to come in. I walked into the cafe. It was busy with the mid-morning laptop crowd. The smell of roasted coffee was comforting. Normal. I saw Marjorie in a booth at the back. She wasn't alone. Sitting next to her, wearing a polo shirt and a blazer, was Darren Pike. I froze. The ambush. I almost turned around and walked out, but then I saw the look on Marjorie's face. It wasn't triumph. It was desperation. She looked cornered, and Darren Pike looked like a man who was watching his business model crumble. I walked over to the booth. I didn't sit down. "You said just you and me." I said, "Darren is here as a technical advisor," Marjorie said, her voice tight. "He can explain the safety parameters better than I can. Sit down. Eleanor." Everyone is staring. I looked around. A few people glanced up. The social pressure. She was counting on my politeness. I sat down. but I sat on the edge of the chair, ready to bolt. Start talking. I said, "What is this risk you mentioned?" Marjorie looked at Darren. He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Butler," he began, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "Your mother is very concerned about digital footprinting. In our analysis of the family's data, we found some anomalies." "Anomalies?" "Patterns," he said. "We ran a predictive algorithm based on the cousin's activity. We found that without the safety bundle, the exposure to undesirable elements increases by 80%. I stared at him. "You are talking about an algorithm?" "You told me there was a specific risk to Lila." "There is," Marjorie interrupted. "Eleanor, listen to me. The world is changing. Children are being targeted. I have read reports. I have seen the news. You lied." I said flatly, "There is no secret. There is no family history. You just made that up to get me here." "I did it to get you to listen," Marjorie hissed, "because you are so stubborn. You are so obsessed with your privacy that you are blind to the danger." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Her fingers cold. "I need them on the plan. Eleanor, I need all of them." "Why?" I pulled my hand away. "Why is it so important that you have 5 dots on a map? Why can't 4 be enough?" "Because the contract requires 5, Darren blurted out. The table went silent. Marjorie shot him a look of pure venom. I looked at Darren. "The contract?" Darren looked down at his coffee. He had said the quiet part out loud. "The vendor agreement," I said, piecing it together, "the kickback. You don't get the Tier 1 incentive unless you have 5 active lines. Is that it?" Darren shifted in his seat. "It is a volume-based model. Mrs. Butler, to unlock the enterprise-level monitoring tools, the ones your mother wants, we need a minimum of 5 users. It is a software licensing issue." I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "So that is it." "It is not about safety. It is not about love. It is about a software license. You needed Lila to be the 5th user so you could get the admin dashboard." "It is about the tools," Marjorie cried. "The tools allow me to protect you. If I don't have the enterprise license, I can't see the text logs. I can't see the deleted photos." "You want to see deleted photos?" I asked, disgusted. "Mom, they are children. They hide things," she shouted. "Everyone hides things. You hide things. People are allowed to hide things. Mom, that is what being a person is. Not in this family." Marjorie slammed her hand on the table. The china rattled. People turned to look. I stared at her. The mask was gone. The benevolent grandmother was gone. Sitting in front of me was a terrified, controlling woman who believed that the only way to love someone was to consume them. "You finally said it," I said quietly. "You finally admitted the because." Marjorie was breathing hard, her chest heaving. "I want every grandchild on a plan I control so I can track them," she said, her voice trembling with the force of her conviction. "Because I am the only one who sees the threats. And I excluded Lila because you are the leak in the boat." "Eleanor, I am the leak?" "You are untrustworthy," she spat. "You are secretive. You keep her away from me. You question everything. You make it impossible to run this family efficiently." I stood up. "You mean I am unmanageable?" I said. Marjorie stared up at me, her eyes wide and wet. "Yes," she whispered, "you are unmanageable. And because of that, you are dangerous." I looked at Darren Pike. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. "Cancel the contract." "Darren," I said, "because if you don't, I am going to the district attorney with the fraud complaint. I have the bank records. I have the forged signature. I will burn your little data harvesting business to the ground." Darren went pale. "And Mom," I said, looking down at her, "if you ever contact Lila again, if you ever try to buy her with a phone or a trust fund or a car, I will file for a restraining order, and I will use your own emails as evidence." I turned and walked away. "Eleanor!" Marjorie screamed after me. "Eleanor, you come back here. You are making a mistake. You are cutting her off." I kept walking. I walked out the door, into the cool air. I saw Caleb across the street. He started to get out of the truck, but I waved him off. I was okay. I was shaking, but I was okay. I had faced the monster. I had named it. I drove home in silence. I felt lighter. The confusion was gone. I knew exactly what I was fighting now. But the fight wasn't over. When I got home, I went to my mailbox. I was expecting another letter from the trust, or maybe a bill. Instead, there was a plain white envelope, no return address. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It looked like a printout from a banking terminal. Application for secured line of credit. Applicant: Marjorie Whitaker. Collateral: Whitaker Grandchildren Technology Fund. Cosigner/guarantor. Reference: Eleanor Butler. My breath caught in my throat. The date on the application was yesterday. Even after I caught her. Even after the lawyer's letter. Even after the bank draft failed. She was trying to take out a loan against the trust fund, the fund that was supposedly for the kids' college, and she was listing me as a guarantor. I looked closer at the document. Purpose of loan: real estate acquisition. 442 Elm Street expansion. She wasn't just buying phones. She was expanding the house. She was building something. And then I saw the note in the margin, handwritten in Darren Pike's script. Approved pending final bio-verification. Bio-verification. My mind flashed back to Aunt June, the hairbrush, the DNA test. They weren't just using my credit. They were using something else, something physical. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. This wasn't just about control anymore. This was about ownership, literal, biological ownership. I grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to the lawyer this time. I was going to the police station, because I realized, with a horror that made my blood run cold, that the final bio-verification probably meant they needed a fresh sample from Lila. And Marjorie knew where Lila went to school. The fluorescent lights of the Briar Glen Public Library community room hummed with a low, electric buzz that sounded like anxiety given a frequency. I had reserved the room for 2 hours. It was neutral ground. No home court advantage for Marjorie. No emotional baggage of my childhood living room. Just gray carpet, a long laminate table, and the smell of old paper and floor wax. I arrived 30 minutes early. I set up the room with the precision of a prosecutor preparing for a grand jury. At the far end, in a small nook meant for children's reading circles, I set up a station for Lila. I put down a stack of coloring books, a box of new markers, and a pair of noise-canceling headphones connected to her tablet, which was loaded with downloaded movies. No Wi-Fi, no tracking, just offline entertainment. I needed her close enough to be safe, but mentally far enough away to be shielded from the carnage I was about to unleash. On the main table, I laid out the evidence. I didn't pile it in a messy stack. I arranged it in 5 distinct piles, one for each person attending: Marjorie, Tessa, Graham, Aunt June, and Caleb. Each pile contained photocopies of the documents I had gathered over the last hellish month. The credit inquiry report showing the hard check from Lakeview Financial. The carrier contract draft listing me as a responsible party and joint liability holder. The bank notification of the failed unauthorized auto draft. The vendor incentive spreadsheet from Marjorie's own Dropbox. The trust amendment tying Lila's education fund to the surveillance plan. And finally, the bio-verification loan application I had received yesterday. I stood back and looked at the table. It looked cold. It looked undeniable. Caleb walked in first, carrying a tray of coffees. He looked nervous, his eyes scanning the room as if checking for exits. "You sure about this?" "Elle?" he asked, setting the cups down. "This is the nuclear option. It is the only option," I said, smoothing a crease in one of the papers. "They are not listening to me. Caleb, they think I'm being hysterical. Today, they are going to see the math." The family started to trickle in at 10 o'clock. Tessa arrived with a tightness around her mouth that added 10 years to her face. She didn't hug me. She sat down, crossed her arms, and stared at the wall. Graham walked in looking like a man marching to the gallows. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Aunt June came next, looking grim and resolute. giving my hand a quick, hard squeeze before taking her seat. Marjorie arrived last. She swept into the room wearing a pale blue coat and a scarf that looked like spun silver. She carried herself with the tragic dignity of a deposed queen. She looked at the library surroundings with a faint curl of her lip, as if the very air of a public institution was beneath her. "Hello." "Eleanor," she said, her voice soft and wounded. "I suppose this is where we are doing this? Like strangers?" I gestured to the chair at the head of the table. "Sit down." "Mom?" Marjorie sighed, a long, suffering sound, and took her seat. She glanced at Lila in the corner, who was happily coloring a picture of a dragon. "At least you brought her," Marjorie said. "That is a start. She is wearing headphones. Mom, she can't hear you, and you are not going over there. Today is about the adults." I sat at the opposite end of the table. I didn't open with a speech about feelings. I didn't talk about my childhood wounds. I simply pointed to the papers in front of them. "Turn over the first page, please." Tessa rolled her eyes but flipped the page. Marjorie didn't move. She just stared at me with a watery, pitying gaze. "Eleanor." "Really?" Marjorie said. "Can we stop the theatrics? We are a family. We do not need exhibits. Turn the page." "Mom," I said. She didn't, so I started reading. "Document 1, I said, my voice steady. "A hard credit inquiry dated January 21st, initiated by Lakeview Wireless, authorized by Marjorie Whittaker. Target subject, Eleanor Butler." I looked at Tessa. "You told me I was being dramatic." "Tessa, you told me to let it go. Look at the inquiry. That is a hit on my credit score for a debt I did not sign for." Tessa looked at the paper. She shifted in her seat. "Okay, so she ran a check. She paid for the phones. It is a technicality. Turn to page 2. I commanded. They turned. Document 2. Carrier agreement draft. Please look at the highlighted section. Responsible party. This clause states that in the event of default by the primary holder, the secondary party assumes full financial liability for all 5 lines, plus the enterprise monitoring subscription." I paused. "That is $10,000 of liability." "Tessa, if Mom stops paying, or if she dies, that debt belongs to me. Not you, not Graham, me, because she used my social security number to backstop the account." Tessa frowned. She looked closer at the paper. "Wait, why you? Why not me?" "Because your credit score is 620. "Tessa," Marjorie said. Her voice cut through the room, sharp and dismissive. "Eleanor has the Tier 1 rating. It was a business decision." The room went silent. Tessa's face turned a blotchy red. Marjorie hadn't just insulted her. She had revealed she had checked Tessa's credit too. "Turn to page 3, I said, not letting the moment linger. "This is a notification from my bank. Dated last Wednesday. Attempted draft of $412. I looked directly at Marjorie. "You tried to set up autopay using the voided check I gave you 3 years ago for the refinance. You tried to reach into my checking account and take money to pay for a tracking system I explicitly refused." Marjorie smoothed her scarf. "I assumed you would want to contribute. It is expensive. Eleanor, I thought you would want to help your brother." "By stealing from me?" I asked. "It is not stealing if it is family," Marjorie cried, her composure cracking. "I was moving money. I was managing resources. You have so much, and you are so stingy. This isn't about generosity." "Mom," I said, my voice rising just enough to be heard over her deflection. "It is about consent. You do not have the right to touch my money. You do not have the right to use my name." Tessa was looking at the bank draft document. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Mom, you tried to pull money from her account?" she asked, her voice quiet. "You told me you paid for everything in cash. You said it was a gift." "It is a gift," Marjorie insisted. "I am paying for the devices. I just needed help with the monthly service fees until my dividends clear next month. So it wasn't free," Graham said. He spoke for the first time, his voice raspy. "You told me it was free. You told me the vendor incentive covered the service. We will get to the vendor incentive, I said. Turn to page 4. This was the spreadsheet, the one with the rows labeled kickback and referral bonus. I watched Graham read it. I saw the color drain from his face. Lakeview Wireless is not just a phone store, I explained. It is a front for Darren Pike's data aggregation business. Pike Enterprises collects user data, location habits, browsing history, app usage, and sells it to third-party marketing firms. That is what the safety bundle actually is. It is a spy program. I pointed to the column on the right. And this shows that Marjorie Whitaker receives a $1,500 kickback for every 5 lines she enrolls in the enterprise monitoring tier. I looked at my mother. You didn't just buy phones. You sold us. You sold your grandchildren's privacy to Darren Pike for $300 a head. Marjorie stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. That is a lie, she shouted. It is a standard referral program. Everyone does it. It is smart business. It is trafficking in personal data. I shouted back. You are taking money to put spyware on your grandchildren. I am keeping them safe. Marjorie screamed, her face twisting. I am the only one who cares where they are. You let them run wild. You let them disappear. I need to see them. She was panting, her chest heaving. The mask of the gentle matriarch lay shattered on the floor. I looked at Graham. Graham, I said softly, tell them what she offered you. Graham looked at Marjorie. He looked at the spreadsheet. He looked at his own hands. She paid off my van, he whispered. What? Tessa asked, whipping her head around. She paid off the transmission repair, Graham said, his voice trembling. And she promised to pay for Leo's soccer travel, but only if I signed the insurance waivers, and only if I got Eleanor to sign too. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. She told me to pressure you, Elle. She said if I didn't get you on board, she would cut off the sports money. She said you were the blockage. She offered me a bonus if I could break you. Tessa stared at Graham. You knew? You knew she was paying you to manipulate her? I needed the money. Tess, Graham cried. I am drowning. The room descended into chaos. Tessa was yelling at Graham. Marjorie was yelling at me. Caleb was standing up, ready to intervene. Only Aunt June sat perfectly still. Quiet, June said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. It had the weight of 60 years of observation behind it. The room fell silent. June looked at Marjorie. I told you. Marjorie, June said, her voice sad and steady. I told you 30 years ago, you cannot own people. I am not owning them. Marjorie spat. I am helping them. You are purchasing them. June corrected. You are buying their obedience. And when Eleanor refused to be bought, you tried to steal her identity to force the sale. June turned to the rest of us. Your mother has a sickness. She said, it is a sickness of the soul. She believes that love is a transaction. She believes that if she pays enough, she owns the title deed to your lives, and she is terrified that if she stops paying, or if she stops tracking, you will all realize that you don't actually need her. That is not true, Marjorie wailed. It was a high, thin sound, like a wounded animal. I love them. I do everything for them. Then why did you exclude Lila? I asked. I asked the question quietly. It cut through the noise like a razor. Marjorie stopped crying. She looked at me. Her eyes dried instantly, turning into hard, flinty stones. Because you are dangerous, she said. The room held its breath. Did you use my information without permission? I asked. One question. Yes or no? Marjorie stared at me. She lifted her chin. She adjusted her silver scarf. I did what was necessary to secure the family legacy. She said, yes or no? Mom, I will not be interrogated by my own daughter. She sniffed. I acted as the matriarch. I made executive decisions. If you are too small-minded to understand the complexity of estate planning, that is your failing, not mine. She refused to say it. She refused to admit the act. She wrapped it in fog and titles. I looked at the final document on the table, the one I hadn't discussed yet. Then let us talk about the legacy. I said, I picked up the loan application. The bio-verification document. You applied for a secured line of credit yesterday, I said, to expand the house. And you listed the collateral as the Grandchildren Technology Fund. I slid the paper toward her, but the bank required a guarantor, and they required a final verification. I looked at Tessa and Graham. She wasn't just tracking the kids. She was leveraging their trust funds to build an addition on her house, and she was using my credit profile to guarantee the loan. Marjorie's face went white. She hadn't known I had this document, and the note here. I continued, reading from the margin. Approved pending bio-verification. I looked at Aunt June. June told me about the hairbrushes. Mom, I know you have been collecting DNA. I know you have been running tests. Marjorie stood frozen. I filed a police report this morning. I said, the words landed like stones. For identity theft, for attempted fraud, and for unlawful surveillance. Tessa gasped. Elle, you called the cops? I had to. I said, because she won't stop. Because she thinks she is the law. Marjorie looked at me. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not the performance of fear, but the cold reality of consequences. You are breaking the family. She whispered, you are destroying everything I built. No. Mom, I said. I stood up. My legs felt solid. My hands were steady. You broke the trust first. You broke it when you handed Lila a notebook while everyone else got a phone. You broke it when you sold our data to Darren Pike. You broke it when you tried to rob my bank account. I looked at my siblings. Lila will not pay the price for your need to manage people. I will not let my daughter be a line item on your spreadsheet. I gathered my papers. I put them back in my folder. Here is how it is going to be. I announced to the room, I have frozen my credit at all 3 bureaus. I have filed formal disputes on the inquiries. I have sent a cease and desist letter to Lakeview Wireless. If any of you, attempt to use my name or Lila's name on a document again, I will press charges. I looked at Tessa and Graham. I love you guys. I do. But I cannot be part of a system that requires me to sell my child's privacy to pay for your silence. If you want to see us, you can come to our house. You can call me. But we will not attend events hosted by Marjorie. We will not be on the group chat. We will not be tracked. Marjorie was trembling. She reached into her purse. Her hand shook so badly she struggled with the clasp. She pulled out a white envelope. It was sealed with wax. She slid it across the table. It hissed against the laminate. You think you are so righteous, she hissed. You think you know everything. She pointed a manicured finger at the envelope. If you walk away, Eleanor, if you leave this room and cut me off, don't you blame me when you learn the truth. I looked at the envelope. It was thick, heavy. What is it? Tessa asked, leaning forward. It is the reason, Marjorie said. Her eyes locked on mine. It is the real reason I needed to track Lila. It is the reason I needed the bio-verification. She smiled. A cruel, tight little smile. Go ahead. Open it. See what you are protecting. My heart hammered against my ribs. The doubt flared up. That ancient, planted seed of doubt. What if she's right? What if there is something wrong? What if I am the villain? I reached for the envelope. Then I stopped. I looked at Lila in the corner. She had finished coloring the dragon. She was holding it up, admiring the purple wings. She was happy. She was whole. She was unburdened by the poison at this table. If I opened that envelope, I was playing Marjorie's game. I was accepting her premise that there was a secret to be revealed, a flaw to be uncovered. I was letting her set the terms of reality one last time. I pulled my hand back. No. I said. Marjorie blinked. What? I am not opening it, I said. You have to, she cried. You have to know. I don't have to know anything you want to tell me, Mom, because whatever is in there, it is just another weapon, and I am disarming you. I picked up the envelope. I didn't tear it open. I didn't look at it. I walked over to the shredder that sat in the corner of the library conference room. Marjorie screamed, No, Eleanor! I fed the envelope into the slot. The machine whirred. The teeth gnashed. The thick paper groaned as it was sliced into confetti. Marjorie lunged across the table, knocking over her coffee. Brown liquid splashed across the responsible party contract. "You fool!" she shrieked. "You stupid, stubborn fool! You threw away the truth!" I watched the last strip of white paper disappear into the bin. "I threw away the lie," I said. I walked over to the corner. I knelt down next to Lila. "Hey, sweetie," I said, taking off her headphones. "You ready to go?" Lila looked up, her eyes bright. "Is the meeting over?" "Yes," I said. "The meeting is over." "Did we win?" she asked, innocent. I looked back at the table. Marjorie was sobbing into her hands, the coffee dripping onto the floor. Tessa was staring at me with a mixture of horror and awe. Graham had his head on the table. "We won," I said. I took Lila's hand. We walked toward the door. "Eleanor!" Marjorie wailed, her voice echoing off the cinder-block walls. "You will be back. You need me. You will crawl back when the money runs out." I didn't turn around. I didn't slow down. I pushed the heavy library doors open, and we stepped out into the bright, cold winter sun. The air tasted sharp and clean. I squeezed Lila's hand. She squeezed back. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "We can get anything we want." We walked to the car, leaving the noise, the contracts, and the heavy, suffocating weight of the Whitaker family legacy behind us. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Graham would lose his van, or if Tessa would keep the phones. I didn't know what was in the envelope I had shredded, but as I buckled my daughter into her seat, I knew one thing for sure. We were free. Thank you so much for listening to My Mom Gifted an iPhone 17 Pro Max for all her grandchildren except my daughter. This was a story about boundaries, control, and the courage it takes to break the cycle. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to deal with a family member who used gifts as leverage? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button for revenge stories and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. We have more drama, more secrets, and more justice coming your way soon. Until next time, stay safe. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living a good life, free from control,